It was hard not to feel depressed at 7 in the morning. Just like Earth, chill winters were dark and gloomy affairs. Closer to the poles there was actually snow, but around the capital the onset of winter meant crisp cold days like late fall back home, interspersed with gloom and cold rain that turned the world grey, washing away colours even after the sun rose. Slouching in the autocab, Tom watched the grey world roll past as he sped towards the Sochet campus. It should be raining. It would have matched my mood. It was the irony of it all that nagged at him the worst. The Shorvanti had opened the galaxy to humanity. Not in the sense of any great exodus that was lowering the population back home, with colony worlds sprouting across the stars or worlds too cold for the Shill and Helcom, or too hot for the Rakiri. No. Humanity was coming out and joining a vast galactic empire in dribs and drabs, and his biggest hope until last week would be the burgeoning idea Jummer had fostered about humanity earning one of those empty worlds by demonstrating they were the kind of species who could take care of a planet if given a fresh start. That had been last week's problem. This week's problem was not being eaten. He looked away from the window. The lights of passing traffic were the same here as back home, if you didn't count all the aerial traffic overhead. He reached down, tugging at his sleeve covering his left arm. It still hurt like the blazes without the medication. Zin Shiki's claws had dug in deep when he reached in to fish her out, and if the salve was covering most of the pain, it wasn't gone. It throbbed dully, and his mood grew bleak. Back home, friends were alive who might be dead now, if not for the miracle of Shorvanti medical care. The invasion had cost him everything, but at least he had the objectivity of seeing its benefits. It had taken time for things to even begin to get normal again, but the cures that rolled out had turned death sentences into miracles. The scourge of cancer, gone in his lifetime. Julia, who married his oldest friend, had been afflicted with macular degeneration. She'd been losing her sight by degrees, and they'd been working her travel business as hard as they could before the landing, getting out and building memories for her before her sight went completely. Now, they'd be doing good business opening Earth up to interested Shorvanti when he left. Hunting lodges for Akiri were sprouting up in Canada, while Shorvanti and Helcom flocked to the tropics, which enjoyed a new boom in tourism. Human beings were still laughing, loving, fighting, feuding, making and doing, but without the burden of global warming, devastating pollution or the threat of nuclear war. Earth wasn't independent, but humanity was finally starting to think like one species. However horribly it had happened, and how awkward the steps since, humanity was leaving the cradle. The Empire was the Empire, but setting that aside, the actual technology had finally set humanity free. And really, that was the irony. After suffering an invasion by a high-tech alien empire, he was still about to be clawed to death by a hormonal teenage panther girl. How do they even find mates after? It's not like she can take out a personal ad. Single grey Pejrin seeks male for long conversations, hunts in the park and lifetime romance. Has leftovers. It lacks panache. By the time that was an issue, any evidence of his death would come out of a stomach pump. He thought of all the letters to people back home he could have written. There wasn't time now. He stared dully at the cane at his side. He needed to do without that, if he could manage it. He'd do without the cane if he could. One way or another, he was going to walk without a limp. Not go down like wounded prey. Somehow, he needed to think this through. Find an answer without a body count. You've gone through all the information there is. You've had 3 attempts on your life, managed to have a sword handy for one, and been lucky as hell the other 2. So far, you've only been gutted like a carp. And that was it. If this didn't work, he was going to die. You aren't 25 anymore. No, he was an elder, and wounded prey at that. The thought made him sink deeper into a depressed lethargy. This wasn't a fight of galactic technology versus human know-how. This was more like smearing himself with steak tartar and walking into a lion's den. Without any high-tech involved, it was going to be a fight of youth and speed, and claws, against experience and treachery. So be it. The trap was set. It wasn't just baited, and unless he made it more convincing, it felt like pretty weak sauce. One-on-one, she had every advantage. If he kept letting her pick the time and place, his luck was going to run out. In a straight-up fight, he was probably dead meat. You need to pull it together. You're not feeling all that tricky just now because your arm hurts and your throat almost got ripped out. That doesn't matter. Get your game face on. He couldn't even go to the authorities. What would be the point? Go to Vemi Rasani and she'd be convinced by the claw marks all right. Zin Shiki might be thrown in jail, only for him to live with a death mark on his back, hunted down by the rest of her family. And they could just use a sniper rifle. Even worse would be if Miv or Leia got hurt. The invasion had taken his wife and daughter. This way there weren't going to be any bystanders. Not this time. He closed his eyes, seeing himself on the windswept savannah. The tree was there, but the lowest branches were out of reach. The monkey was gone. He stood alone on the plain, clutching his arm, holding a cane, but most of all he was surrounded by endless plains of tall grass, just waiting for the scream. Right now she's probably getting ready to do a victory lap while her warband calls dibs on the leftovers. The stares of the kids were the worst thing she could ever remember. The scorn of her bandmothers had been withering. One bandmother, Hraktagar Snowhunter, actually called her weak, asking for her older band sister, Putviri, to take the hunt rather than lose such a fine hunter's name. Of course, since Putviri was her birth daughter, the other bandmothers had rejected the proposal. But that it had been made at all was bad enough. As bad as that had been, the stares of the kits were the worst. She wasn't the eldest of the non-adults in their warband, but she was close. Now the youngest kits no longer came near. When they looked at her at all, their gazes were filled with doubt, as if she was somehow diseased, unworthy. The respect she had always enjoyed from them was gone. Not that Putviri had helped. She wasn't actually claiming the hunt, but she wasn't saying anything at all. She didn't need to. It was there in her eyes, and the still way she held her Asaiak. She was waiting for Zin Shiki to fail, hoping for it. Even her claim that she'd wounded him hadn't saved her in the family meeting last night. If the human proved too much for Zin Shiki to bring down on her last try, then Putviri would. Any lack of prestige for bringing down wounded prey, even badly wounded prey, would be washed clean by restoring the lost honor of the warband. At least Raikishi wasn't avoiding her, which was a great comfort. Raikishi was training to be the next Pathfinder for the clan. Raikishi's choice had once made her seem weak in Zin Shiki's eyes. Not greatly, but perhaps a little. Now she was standing on the edge of failure. Raikishi's choice did not seem so foolish. To be a warband's Pathfinder had been a great honor long before their people left Pesh, and now Pathfinders served as the means for keeping the roaming warbands, the ones not feuding with one another at least, in communication. The one thing warbands loved more than fighting with each other was talking about one another. Pathfinders dealt with aliens, found the work, ironed out the claims and contracts, talked with and about the other warbands, planned, fussed, picked fights, and forged alliances. And most of all, they made sure mails were circulated between the families. Being a Pathfinder meant Raikishi was never going to be a hunter. While she might kill for the warband someday, even if it never happened, the path to her earned name was still certain. In another year or so she would be old enough, and their warband's Pathfinder, Sunchaser, would stop grousing about her rage and get around to adopting Raikishi as her named daughter. That would, at least, make her provisionally named, but only an adult in the shakiest terms. She would face a long and uncertain wait until Sunchaser died before she could eat her. In the meantime, she was far less attractive to any mate. Sunchaser was not particularly old.
Look, you almost got him, so don't worry so much.
Raikishi brushed out her mane as Zin Shiki groomed herself in the mirror, going on about the latest news.
Why, only last month, Sunchaser told me she had a message from Truthcutter in the HFY. Truthcutter said she's spoken with Great Veil of the Maraktaran and Stargazer in the Chulkatat warband. I know the Dark Shadows can be a bit flaky, but Stargazer and the Stone Mountains have been getting hold of the best news lately. Anyway, they both said that Winterclaw in the Galiesh didn't get her name until the very last try. Not that Galiesh wants anyone to know, but the fact is she's no better than she should be. This time, don't try something so complicated. Just find an honourable place, scream the challenge, and kill him quickly.
Raikishi leaned in and hugged her, rubbing cheeks and trying to elicit a purr.
No more elaborate plans.
On the other hand, Pathfinders were also terrible gossips, and Raikishi was a natural. There was no doubt Raikishi was on the right path for her, and at least if anything too bad was being said behind her back, she'd have let her know. Today, her sister tried to raise her spirits. That was a good sign, at least.
I suppose you're right, but I don't know where his grounds are now. I tried at the school, and I tried at his home. His other school is much larger, and I will stand up badly there. An attempt there could harm the family.
She tried keeping her Asaic from drooping, and she reached down to tug at it.
This could be a long hunt now. Be patient. Don't get frustrated.
Raikishi gave her a look in the mirror and elbowed her ribs.
Don't deny it. You're tugging your Asaic again.
Zin Shiki chuffed in aggravation and let it go.
I had him in my claws. I know. You said it 7 times now. Yes, I am counting, but I believe you. He was right there. I had a perfect way inside. Anyway, I'm not impatient. I scaled the cliffside and waited in the dark for hours. You said.
Raikishi let go of the hug and slipped in beside her, along the long bathroom counter.
Seriously, just kill him. Nothing fancy this time. I know you wanted to make it special, but Raktagar isn't joking. She'd love it if her daughter became an adult and sat with her as a hunter. Of course she would, Zin Shiki said unhappily. I don't know how long it would be before I ever got to hunt again. Maybe never. Don't be so dramatic. It might be 2 or 3 years, but not forever.
She couldn't help it. 2 or 3 years of Pitviri as an adult, treating her like a child. Even after that, Pitviri would rub in the failure for the rest of their lives. Her ears drew back, as she had to fight off a rictus snarl of anguish.
Hey, none of that. You had him under your claws, remember?
Raikishi bounced up from the counter and cuffed her on the ear lightly.
What did he taste like anyway?
It was a good question. She'd held on for dear life and her claws had sunk deep. Even after pulling her out of the pool, she tasted the blood. It was not the sable colour of Pezrin, or the blue of the Shill. It wasn't like Helcom or the detested Rakiri. It was rich, coppery scented, and red. She'd never had anything like it before. How to explain? It wasn't like anyone had ever tasted human meat as far as she knew. What had he called the meat she'd eaten, though? That had been nice. It was earth meat, too. She squared her shoulders, collecting her Asaic into a picture of confidence.
He tasted like chicken.
Sitting there listening to the plan, Desala almost dropped her papaya. You're putting me on! Down at the other end of the long table, Desi looked at her coolly.
I am not. Be fair, Desi, she has a point.
Letzi spoke up.
No one has ever done one of these sit-downs before and...
Sit in, Sefa interjected, picking at her meal while the others listened.
Fine, sit in.
Letzi shrugged and carried on undeterred.
The point is that no one has ever done one. If we saw one going on, we wouldn't know what it was.
I know. We can make signs. Sephir waved her fork with enthusiasm. Lark and Nesfa looked at one another with some reservations.
I could cover it with the vlog, but they still won't get the message out until the next edition.
Lark offered pensively. At least it's something I can talk to Bree about without having to censor the conversation. Melondi canted her head and frowned slightly. What's going on with you two anyway?
That's a long story for another time.
Lark shook her head quickly.
The point is the student blog can't really help.
She's right, Nefa nodded.
It's not good for advertising on no notice. Professor Borai is going to be gone after the class tomorrow. That gives us 1 day. 2 if we go over tonight. Deeps, she'll be long gone by the time most people even hear about it. But not before she gives us another test.
Kazan was shaking her head as Kamara rubbed her temples.
Can you imagine failing 2 full exams? What that would do to our grades? I said you wouldn't like it, but that's exactly why we have to do it.
Desi shook her head.
It doesn't matter how many students hear about it. What matters is that Professor Pelavon and Head Administrator Sasano will.
Remind me how that's an improvement. Pris set her drink down and waved a hand airily at Desi and Melondi.
I know Mel suggested we try something human, but isn't there something more appropriate?
It's totally appropriate, Desi rallied, unfazed.
We were studying it only the week before vacation with that Gandhi person. It's basically homework. Belder, did Liam have any ideas?
Jack sighed.
I mean, he is human. Nothing helpful. I mean, it's not like he lived in a red zone, and I'm still trying to understand this whole flash mob thing he was telling me about.
Calling in sick would just get us in trouble, Belle said listlessly, squirming a bit under the sudden attention.
Besides, I don't want to get him in trouble before our date. I still have enough problems with his matriarch. Goddess, this won't keep us on campus this shell, will it? It will be fine.
Jack sighed again, this time with enough feeling that you could set sail by it.
Mel, what do you think? Is this the best option? We're all agreed Barai is going to hit us with another test.
Melondi finished the bite she'd been working on and looked down the table.
That means our grades are screwed either way, right?
Reluctant or not, that met with general nods of agreement from everyone there.
So, we do it tonight. If we're going down, we might as well go down the way we want, instead of the way she wants,
Melondi said firmly, as she shredded some.
That's the human thing. We'll just have to do the best we can.
Thinking it over, the best Tom expected was to try getting through today and tomorrow, and hope that something would give him an idea. After that, his safety net was gone. He'd be back on campus at the academy, but technically he wouldn't be at Solche, and he wouldn't be at his home with Leah. He'd be back to square one as far as where Zin Shiki could attack. The thought was dispiriting. There were rules to the whole thing, but there wasn't a rulebook. It was a reasonable bet that he could survive the next 2 days, but the idea of dragging his problem back to the academy wasn't a winner. He could probably alert the death's heads through Mel, but the idea of Zin Shiki laying dead in the forest after one of the commando pods took her out didn't appeal on any level. It was survival, and they'd probably make the body vanish. Ganya might never know, but he would, and the idea of her death sickened him. It wasn't all about him, although, as the one to be eaten, it certainly felt that way. The problem was that just making it about him wasn't much better. Presuming he somehow survived and Zin Shiki didn't. Somewhere, some interior official tracking Melondi would tally up a second mark on his body count, and...
Professor?
Sefe spoke louder, and he shook his head. I'm very sorry. I got lost in my thoughts for a moment. He jutted his chin at her, in the way they did around here, and she stood up. What was your question again?
I just wondered if you'll be attending the faculty social tonight for the end of the exchange.
Sefe smiled uncertainly.
It's just, I told my mothers and sisters all about you, and they're really curious.
Great. Like I have time for another dog and pony show. Unless... Your parents will be there? All of you? He looked around the classroom as the girls nodded enthusiastically. Zin Shiki didn't nod, though her ear might have flickered. Why, certainly. I wouldn't miss it, and I look forward to meeting them. It was an idea, maybe even a good idea. The faculty social was going to be on the campus, and that made it safe ground. If he could talk to her mothers, maybe get some clues that weren't in the books. Zin Shiki, what about your family? Will someone from your warband attend?
It is not customary.
The Persian girl didn't blink, her green eyes fixed on him intently. Fine. It was worth a try. Time to bait the trap. That's a shame. Tom gave off a sigh and shrugged, looking away from her. The girl's stare was direct, but right now it was unnerving. It's my last day tomorrow, and I have to go into seclusion tomorrow night. Janeris raised her hand, and he gave her the nod.
Professor, why are you going into seclusion?
Oh, well, I'm getting married on the first day of Shell. It's going to be a big event with a lot of people, but the night before the ceremony, it's traditional for humans not to be seen by their fiancé. We're doing sort of a mixed ceremony, since one of my fiancés is a Shamanta worshipper. There was that blush again, as the girl shifted and tried not to grin. It wasn't a moment's wait before 3 girls raised their hands, and he gave the nod to Helnia. Yes?
But you aren't dressed for it.
There were nervous giggles around the room, and Helmia turned blue. Zin Shiki's tail twitched in what he was coming to think of as amusement. Or she was seeing through him.
What do humans do? I mean, we've heard stories. There's something called a bachelor party, sir.
Bugger. There's that, when it really happens. Jama was insisting. Focus, man. Actually, yes. But for my particular religion, I have to seclude myself. I'm going over to human food. I spend the evening alone sacrificing a fried chicken, because the next day I'll be surrounded, and after that, is off to what we call a honeymoon. The girls were grinning even more. Okay, they'd heard of that one. My wives and I are going on a long trip. They don't know I know, but we're going back to Earth. We're taking a sabbatical. It could be months, and that's just the travel time alone. He wasn't looking at Zin Shiki. He was definitely not looking at Zin Shiki. Even out of the corner of his eye, he couldn't miss the flinch. Parada waved her hand, and was practically bouncing in her seat as he gave her the nod. Yes?
If you don't mind, I was curious. What denomination are you, sir? We've heard there are so many religions on Earth, and your customs are, different?
Fine. Time to start muddying the trail. Oh, I'm with the Episcopalian Church of Latter-day Druids. He nodded sagely. The Reformed branch. We're very big on shrubbery. Nee. Look that up on the bloody datanet, you horny little. Gazette raised her hand, and he nodded.
Sir, that's a long time. Does that mean you're going to retire from teaching and settle down at home?
Give up my job and settle down at home? Sure. Spend my time being the man about the house? The very safe house? Yes. Yes, that's probably the idea. He smiled then, basking in the oohs and ahs from the girls, and he gave them a wink and smiled, in a way he hoped was more winsome than a grimace. Professor Burgress has been so... Don't blow it, Tom. So very educational. I'm so excited to settle down, I may never leave home again. Zin Shiki managed to find a place out of sight after class, and called. She breathed out in relief when her birth mother, Marraquette, who was known in the family as Thunderchild, answered.
Mother? Zin Shiki, this is a surprise.
Her birth mother blinked in pleasure. It's not like you to call.
Mother?
Zin Shiki needed to ask, but she balked, nearly blinking as she choked on the words. Her birth mother was there at the gate to the estates, dressed in the gear of a mere guard, the bandola of her weapons plain and unadorned.
Mother, why are you working at the guard post? That isn't your job.
It needs to be done, her mother said simply. There was no way to see her Asiac on the screen, but the very notion of a pack leader standing guard.
I have made it my job, for now.
This was her fault. Her failure was casting shame on her birth mother. She managed not to blink, but her Asiac thrashed in despair.
Do not worry, mine.
Her mother gazed at her evenly, and showed a hint of fang that displayed confidence.
I will be off duty in time for your return, and we can plan your hunt. I don't know. Mother, there is a function here at the school tonight.
She felt torn inside, just speaking of it now. The notion that she needed help flew in the very face of her being ready as an adult.
I am needed here to track my prey. Is it the faculty party that your school messaged about?
Her mother's ears perked slightly.
Well, then I shall be in attendance. Mother, it's nothing like that. This has nothing to do with our clan honor or carrying out our duties to the Duchess. This is simply a personal mission.
You mean you do not want me there? Her eyes blinked slowly.
It's not like that, Mother, Zin Shiki mewled. You do not see how the Shivanti look at us the way that I do. I do not want to expose you to their scorn. They do not know their own songs of lineage or hold to any kakachakt. They only see us as hired thugs. And I have already caused enough disappointment at home. To be fair, that is all that I am, mine.
Her mother murmured in exasperation.
I am a good hunter, but that is all that I have ever had the chance to learn. You will make your kill, but more important yet, you have the opportunity I did not. You can yet learn how to be greater than I am. I do not know.
Her Asiac wilted, and she was grateful her mother could not see the shame she felt.
I do. I have been hearing more of these humans, and they are more dangerous than we suspected, Thunderchild said firmly. You will be there tonight, and so will I. Mother, you still do not scent it. I am only in this school because of the Duchess.
She did mewl then. There was shame in it, but all she felt was shame.
You do not see how I am treated by the Shivanti. Many of the students treat me like garbage. The teachings offered by the professors are given like scraps from their tables.
Then you take those scraps, mine. You eat of those scraps and you grow strong. Her mother blinked in first-degree affirmation. Does your human treat you this way?
No, Mother, he does not.
Then you picked well. He is worthy prey. She nodded. I will have your finest bandolier set out. We will attend this function looking our best. Now, you come home, and we shall eat before we attend. And it won't be scraps. Tom prowled the dining hall anxiously. Several Shivanti women had approached him eagerly, and he'd spoken with the ones accompanied by his temporary students. That had kept him reasonably safe. Exasperated, but safe. Their questions were easier than dealing with the women from the other families. His girls usually mentioned that he was engaged. The others were more friendly. It had gotten bad enough that he had to excuse himself, making his way to the buffet that was still being set out by a small gathering of Shovanti men in cook's livery. They looked at him nervously, then past him. There should have been a leitmotif. Something in their expressions as they scurried away said it all. Somewhere in the back of his mind, the London Symphony Orchestra queued up "The Monster Is Right Behind You" suite in D minor, in glorious surround sound. With a slow, steady, and certain deliberation, he turned around. He looked. As expected, there was a Pezrin standing right behind him. Unexpectedly, it was not Zin Shiki. The woman looked like her in the face, as far as he could tell from his limited self-instruction on Pezrin, but her fur was a rich black, with a white blaze at her throat. The eyes looking him over meticulously were a deep amber. A carefully worked bandolier ran from one shoulder over her chest, displaying the hilts of 5 richly worked daggers, and 3 gold earrings shone from her left ear. "I am Marraket." She blinked once, and slowly, her tail coiled languidly at her side. "You would be the human called Warwick." "I am." The idea of denying it nearly made him laugh. "You're one of Zin Shiki's mothers." "I am her birth mother. It's pleasing to see you are aware of my approach." What was the right thing to say? To say it had been obvious would surely be an insult. To say he'd been oblivious except for the glances behind him. That could only mark him as easy prey. "That's very kind of you." Tom offered a smile but didn't show his teeth. There was nothing written about that, but then again, not much was. "It was nice of you to come. Is Zin Shiki here?" "I am sure she is watching." Marraket canted ahead in a way that looked diffident, rather than the Shovanti mannerism for questions. He was about to ask when she continued. "I wanted to see you for myself." He blinked. She blinked, slowly and for far longer. It clearly meant something. He still didn't have a clue. He didn't blink again. "Do you mind if I ask why?" "My daughter says you do not treat her as the Shovanti do, that you have defended her honor." Her eyes narrowed slowly, and her tail quirked once. "You look much like a Shovanti, but I have seen that you do not mix easily with them. You do not like being poured." "No, I don't," he nodded. Finally, a chance for real conversation. Maybe now he could find out something of... "I must go, then." Marraket was already turning away and melting toward the crowd. "Die well." "Yeah." He watched her go. Laying a hand on her shoulder seemed like a very bad idea. "Nice talking." He'd made his way around the room, keeping his back to the walls. Say space or not, it seemed like a habit he was going to need to get comfortable with. As it was, it let him see Zin Shiki. The crowd parted around the girl with looks mixed between bewilderment, aversion, and distaste. "Professor?" Zin Shiki looked at him, and might have arched an eyebrow. It was a curiously human expression, and he had the impression it wasn't natural to her. "Miss Zin Shiki," Tom nodded. "I had the pleasure of meeting your..." "Professor Warwick!" Vemi Rasani's voice ran out from across the room, where she stood with 2 other shill. "Please join us." That didn't sound like a request. He looked down at the Pezrin girl and shrugged. "The Shovanti are used to not asking for things," she said solemnly, but there was a glint of fangs. "I will wait here." "I don't think that's necessary. Come with me." Tom set off. He didn't wait to look behind him. He wasn't asking either, but she'd either follow or not. How much courtesy did he want to give the person who wanted to gnaw on his liver? If she came along, it might get him out of this conversation faster. He made his way across the room. He didn't know if he should be relieved or not when he saw Zin Shiki right behind him. She hadn't made a sound along the way.
Ah, there they are, just as I told you.
Rossani beamed at her companions before looking back to Tom.
I wanted to introduce Fele Geraldo and Cospra Kelra. They're with the school board and are here to get our viewpoint on the exchange program. Ladies, this is Professor Warwick and Miss Zin Shiki. They're the pair that provided that amusing little story I was telling you about.
It's a pleasure to meet you. Tom offered a fist to each of the women. Fele was smiling awkwardly. Cospra was older, and she looked him over in a way that was nonplussed but cordial enough.
I trust it's been a very illuminating week here, Professor. I'm sure you'll be going back to the Academy with a new outlook and valuable experiences.
Fele smiled again.
And you, Miss Zartsky? Administrator Rossani has told us that you were admitted provisionally. I was curious, where were you schooled before being allowed into Soche? I was privately schooled according to the traditions of my people.
Zin Shiki held herself very still, but her tail might have twitched.
I am sure you would not be familiar with it. Still, you must have an excellent mind to be allowed to attend.
Fele smiled. He's seen smiles like that. He'd been on the receiving end of them all too often.
I'm here under sponsorship, Zin Shiki said flatly. I was allowed because of patronage, rather than appreciation from my mind.
Well, but there's nothing wrong with that. Fele waved the matter away airily, looking over to Cospra.
Everyone should have an equal chance.
Yes, everyone should. Tom spoke up, breaking in. It was the presumption that galled him. The attitude wasn't nearly as common among Shulvanti as he'd once believed, but some of them acted as if they'd built the whole damn empire themselves, and more than once he'd felt the innate desire to punch one of the smug bitches right in the mouth. Yes, an equal chance. Rossani arched an eyebrow over at her friends.
If we all started equally, Zin Shiki nearly growled, some of us don't. As far as some are concerned, we need sponsorship. Instead, while I do not value everything I learn here, I still value the chance to learn it, but I do not pretend it was offered equally. Miss Kazetsi, I will be the first one to offer it to you, I assure you,
Fele said matronizingly, the blithe expression still written over her, as she nodded down to the Pezrin.
And the first to take it away again if it suited you, she countered. I know very well how my people are thought of. That is something else I have learned here. Miss Kisisi, I assure you, my role with the board is only to evaluate a viewpoint. Do you wish to know my viewpoint? Well, of course. I take an interest in, creative student admission, as well as the faculty exchange, Fele declared breezily. I'm only here to evaluate performance.
Whose performance would that be exactly? The non-shill students? Mine? Tom stepped in front of Zin Shiki. He'd seen her claws coming out, and it only echoed what he felt inside. And evaluate us against who? Her against the Shulvanti students? Me against Shulvanti professors? Why aren't they evaluated? You set an equal chance, but you aren't even trying to learn her name. It's pronounced Zin Shiki. Tom kept in front of the Pezrin girl and crossed his arms. He was seething inside, but at least he wouldn't claw their eyes out. If you want to promise us equality, then I suggest you start by treating us that way. As if punching was so much better. Miv had waited long enough. It was late, but laying there awake was driving her crazy. and she dialed Leia on her Omnipad.
Miv?
Leia's voice sounded bleary, but at least she'd answered.
Goddess, what time is it?
Leia, I'm sorry. I know it's late, but I barely heard anything from Tom since the first day. She drew a breath, trying not to sound like she was panicking. Is everything all right there? The immediate assurance that everything was fine failed to appear. That wasn't promising. She heard Leia take a deep breath. That was bad.
Well?
Oh, goddess! What? What? Miv felt her stomach roll over and head for the bottom. Please tell me it's not a problem with your mother's. Or some teacher from Solche. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to press. I knew you'd do your best, but what's he gotten himself into now?
Miv, it's not like that. Really.
I mean, trust me, it's really not like that. Tell me it's not some woman throwing her tits around and trying to get her claws into him. There was another long breath. I suppose you're half right.
Oh, goddess, I knew it. How could he?
Miv slapped her forehead and rolled up in bed.
With your mothers there? I know you say it doesn't matter so much, but I so wanted us to have their permission. He should be doing his best to make a good impression, not getting tied up with other women. Maybe later, of course, but right now is not the time to...
Miv, stop. Just stop, Leia said sharply. It's not like that at all. He just sort of got into a disagreement with the head administrator over at the faculty social over student equality.
A disagreement?
Well, more of an argument. With that Vermi Rasani woman, the one Garnia detests. Her stomach stopped turning somersaults and slowly righted itself.
Oh, thank the goddess. I worried something was really wrong.
Well... Miv heard that long wheedling tone, and her stomach began another long dive into the depths. There's that, and one of his students kind of wants to kill and eat him.
I'm sorry, what?
Looking on the bright side, my mothers are having a wonderful time.